In this tutorial, we will introduce the 3D flight module and create 3D flights in the timeline. The prerequisites for this tutorial are a defined object color model, a valid calibration for all cameras involved in the flight, as well as the selected objects for all involved cameras. Now click the 3D camera button to enter the flight module. On the left-hand side, all cameras with calibration and object selection are listed. On the right-hand side, a list shows all flights with their duration. Double-click a flight to see a preview. Another way to see a preview is to click directly on a camera. In case you see artifacts like double lines on the pitch, you can at any time go back to the calibration module and correct or improve the calibration. In case you see artifacts like player's arm on the pitch, you can also go back to the object selection module and correct for that. We will now have a look on how to adapt flights such that they could become more spectacular. Take a look at the current game situation. We would like to have a closer look at the last defender, as he is the relevant player for a potential offside situation. Click and hold your left mouse button to rotate the field around the red point. Use the mouse wheel to zoom. With the right mouse button, the field can be translated. With Shift and right click, you can change the point of rotation if necessary. Now move the camera to a good view. Once you're happy with the view, click the button Add Virtual View to add an artificial camera. Virtual views then appear in the list of cameras. In this example, 2 more flights were created, from both original cameras to our virtual view. If we added another virtual view, we'd end up with 6 flights. Before presenting advanced options to modify flights to get them more spectacular, I will first introduce how to add flights into your timeline. For doing so, we change to the editor module. Now, after having prepared our flight, the keyframe is marked 3D. In order to insert a flight into timeline, use the 3D drop-down button. You are listed a selection of cameras to fly to from the currently active camera. Alternatively, you could right-click a camera and add the flight using the context menu. Be careful when deleting flight to not create inconsistencies. If your flight path is not consistent, a red exclamation mark appears next to virtual elements on the timeline. Let's continue with the 3D module to improve our flights. Virtual views appear in the camera pane. You can rename virtual views using the context menu. This will make it easier to identify them later on the editor module. If you are not perfectly happy with a virtual view, change the perspective again. When happy, right-click the virtual camera and click Modify. Similarly, you can remove a virtual view. In earlier versions of Libero, the blending of virtual views was performed differently. You can still select to either blend objects from different cameras or only use the view from the closer camera, which is the default. Assume we would like to modify the camera trajectory of this particular flight to our virtual view. This is achieved by inserting so-called via points into the flight. Using the slider, you can move the time of a flight. At any position, we can still use the trackball to modify the view again. When you found a nice view for your via point, click the button Add Via. Now you can see that the camera trajectory for our flight will pass the added via point. Via points often look fancy when used on simple flights to render them more spectacular, for example, for the flights between 2 original cameras. If you are not perfectly happy with the view of the via point, change the perspective again and click on Modify. With Delete you could remove a via point. You might have noticed that there are already via points inserted automatically. These are calculated such that no regions where no image data is available appear during the flight. Green smileys next to the flight indicate that no artificial via points had to be inserted. Even if you insert a via point that contains black holes originally, the via point will be adapted such that no black holes are contained in the final clip. The duration of a flight from one to another camera can be changed in the flights table on the right hand side of the screen. Double-clicking on the duration allows to modify the length value. A short flight can be convenient if you're in a hurry in a production and there still are some artifacts due to bad calibration or cutouts. Default flight duration can be configured in the project settings. Navigate the menu, select project settings, click on the modules tab and then the 3D flight tab. Here the default length can be configured. Now, the following optimizations to flights are quite advanced and are used rather seldom. The first option to modify a flight is to adapt the spline of the camera movement. Using the slider at the bottom of the screen allows to select how smooth the spline through a via point shall be. Also, you can bias it to one of the cameras. Moreover, you can interrupt the flight at the via point by inserting some stop time. Another advanced option to improve flight quality is to move objects such that the layers from both cameras appear exactly on top of each other. This might be useful if a calibration is not perfect. To move an object, hold the control button and click on a player. Hold the control button and use the arrow keys to move the player. When holding the shift button instead of the control button, you can correct the position of the player marking. In case you insert a marking of this player in the editor later on, the position of this marking will be corrected. In the Optimizations tab on the bottom right side of the screen, you are provided some more functionality for optimization. The button Select Next Object iterates the selection to the next object on the pitch. Optimize Positions for current view tries to automatically optimize the layers for all the objects of the current view. The reset buttons undo the optimization either for one or for all players. Other than that, the flight module also allows you to configure the automatic offside line tool, as this tool is often used in 3D keyframes for soccer. In the rare case that the system mixes up the sides of the pitch, you can change the side of the offside line with the Switch Offside Side button. In case the offside line needs some correction, you can adapt the offset using the respective UI element.